Yeah, we're ready.
Tomorrow I want to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, under recognition of visitors, we have one person that signed in, Dave Holmes.
Thank you very much. As we get into this levy season, not only here, but in other school districts, I may be shooting myself in the foot here, but out of curiosity, I've been attending a lot of these Tea Party meetings, and not only are we, and first of all, I got to commend everything that's going on here, because it's the most anybody could do. But as I attend these Tea Party meetings, it's come to my attention, and I'm doing it not because I'm a whatever they are, but it's because I want to find out what's being said out there. And this Tom Zonowski, I'm not doing his name justice, Tom Zawitowski, he's chairman of the Boy Scout Tea Party. And he's got some good premises to go on. But as I attend these, I'm finding out that he's passing out a lot of half-truths and misinformation to an audience of about 250 to 300 people once a month about what's happening in education. At his last meeting, he said, Waterloo's cutting 50 teachers, and Bristown's cutting 38. And he said, and the superintendent of Bristown said there'll be no raises this year. And he says they ought to take a 10% cut and welcome to reality like the rest of us are doing. And so I listened to this. And I read, he's got a lot of written information that I confronted him about at the end of the meeting. He's saying that he could send his children to St. Patrick's School for $3,800 a year. What he didn't say was his local parish has to pick up the extra money, and he probably puts them on a field local school bus, public transportation, send them over St. Pat's. He didn't say that. He just said, well, why should I pay the local school $8,500 in taxpayers' money? Why should I do that? I can send them for $3,800. No, you can't. But these people, and God love them, they're hardworking people, interesting people, and they listen to this, and they hear this half information, and all of a sudden, it shows up in sound off, well, we're not voting for the levy because they're making too damn much money. And it's in there. It's in April 4th, already in there. They're saying they're not voting for levies because teachers are making too much money. They should be cut, and they should be back to reality with whatever. He says in this one thing, he says, the only reason teachers are required to get a master's degree is because the unions negotiated that requirement so they could get increases in step raises. If I remember right, that was federal legislation through George Bush, which I left behind. It had nothing to do with local unions. So the local unions are getting blamed for all this. When it comes to making that yes or no mark in the ballot, they're going to remember the sound off article. They're going to remember these half-truths. And there's going to be some real concern. So we might be fighting more than just the local economy as we get into this levy promotion, levy passing. So I just made a phone call. Next Tuesday is the next countywide Tea Party meeting. I was real impressed. There was a group of teachers there last time. People, they're trying to hear what this is going on. And this information, as you hear it, and I also found out this guy works for Field School Board because he does their robo calls. I wonder if he gave him a break on the price. But anyhow, please don't think I'm bad about it, but I'm not. These guys are good, these guys are good for him. I'm just saying that this could be detrimental to our levy campaigns, and not only here, but across the county. He's saying that there's 30 teachers, or 30% of teachers, no quote on that, but I'm not sure. teacher is 30. Teachers that are more make over $100,000 a year. Better get me an application, I'm going north, because I don't know, I didn't investigate. I don't think, he said that the newest school bus in Field School District is 26 years old. Can't happen, we won't let them run for 26 years. And I looked at it this morning on the way to work, and I saw a bunch of them look about newer than 26 years old. So, but the people that don't know, and our voters are going to buy into this, and I got into somewhat heated discussion with the guy, because you can give out this information, but don't give out half-truths. And that's what he's doing, and it scares me. So if you get a chance, you're not doing anything next Tuesday, 7 to 9, Maplewood Cafeteria, show up, just to listen. And, you know, just, and see what we might be up against, because it is a concern, and it's a concern of all of us, and we need to get this head on and address it, but tell the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and as we go forward with this one. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Does he have that stuff written in there? Is there any way we can get a copy of that so that we can
Sure.
an extra copy? So we can look through it and count it.
Yeah, you know, just.
Are these copies though? These aren't?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Whatever else you need, I got it, but like I said, he's got his own opinion, we got ours,
Right.
but, and I don't care if he's, you know, saying what he's got to say, but
Right.
tell the whole deal.
Right.
You know, so,
Okay.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Roll call.
Hawk. Here. Bushy Here. John.
Yeah.
Burchett. Here. Wilson.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. I just wanted to say under the president's report, I was down at the art auction and ice cream social, and I know a couple of you guys were here because I saw you down there. They had a great turnout tonight, and I want to commend Miss Early and let's see, PTO and Stacy Wolf, who is the ceramics teacher, art teacher in the high school, and my forgetting his name. Chelsea Ritchie and Mrs. and Brenda Appleman. Is there anybody else? And all the volunteers. But the whole parking lot back there is full, the parking lot here is full, the kids are coming in, and one kid, I said, what did you make? And he said, it's just a tower of amazement. And I said, oh, gotta see that. So it was a little leftover from packing peanuts and paper and stuff. He just thought it was the best thing in the world. And so we got to go in and see that. But it's just, it's nice to see all the community here and supporting the kids, because it was, the kids are real excited about it too. So anyway, didn't get ice cream coming in next year because the ice cream looked good too. So anyway, that's all I have. Superintendent report?
Sure. A lot tonight. I want to start by doing a presentation for you that kind of set the stage for most of the rest of our agenda tonight. Kind of go over in detail some things that you'll see a little bit later on here. So if you give me just a moment to get situated here. So I want to talk tonight about what we've done really since COVID. This has been a continuing process here in this district for years, but we've accelerated what needed to be done for next school year after the beginning of November. We failed our 8 mil levy request, and when it became clear to us that the state would be cutting us some type of percentage with our overall budget. Our overall budget is close to 60% funded through the state of Ohio. So any kind of cut that they make is going to have drastic impacts on us here. So I want to kind of walk you through this tonight, what it looks like right now from the state, what we've done to respond to that, where we currently stand, what we're going to have to do from there, and quite honestly, what our hopes are. Because if we are as bad as some of this will look tonight, we are very hopeful that once all of this dust settles, that we're in a pretty good position. So to take a look at where the state is currently coming in, back middle of last month, about this time last month, Governor Kasich released his executive budget, and about a week or two later, we finally found out what that meant for schools. And so for Waterloo, for next year, fiscal year 12, this is where we tentatively stand with the state. We're going to lose a little over $425,000 in federal stimulus money. The reason that that's a big deal, a lot of people would say that should have never been in there, it was one-time money. The state of Ohio, in their last biennial budget, used that money to bridge the gap for school districts so that they could keep them pretty level funded. So while we get 60% from the state, 2 years ago, 6% of that 60 was stimulus money. This year, 7% of that 60% is federal stimulus money. Next year, it's gone. This current expense, tangible personal property tax, is a little less than $200,000 we're going to be losing. That was something that was supposed to be phased out over the course of time, and I believe that it was supposed to be officially phased out in fiscal year, it was either 18 or 19. And so they've greatly accelerated that process. Non-current TPP is another $853. And then they've increased our state foundation support for next year, the equivalent of 1%, which is a little less than $57,000. Okay, interestingly enough, when the budget first came out, that's what was initially reported. It was reported that the governor had said he was increasing funding for schools because they were strictly focusing on the foundation line items. A little bit later, as more of these things became released, and each of these were released on their own separate spreadsheets. I don't believe there's been one put out by the governor's office yet that shows all of this stuff collectively put together. But for us, that means that we're going to be down about $565,000 for next year, which equates to somewhere between 9 and 10% of our overall budget. These are biennial budgets, so for the following year, fiscal year 13, we have that loss from fiscal year 12, and then on top of that, we are going to lose the remainder of that tangible personal property, a little less than $28,000. After fiscal year 13, that TPP for us is gone. We're also going to lose another $853 in the non-current TPP, and that I believe that has 2 more years where we get phased out. So they're
You explained that to me when I asked some business owners on that second current expense.
yes.
Is that taxpayers' money?
This is
Business money?
yeah. This tangible personal property. Todd, if I misspeak here correctly, but that's a tax that was being assessed to all of the inventory that businesses own. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that
So-
in Randolph and Atwater?
Yes. And so what they did was, when they decided to phase that out, however many years ago it was supposed to be slowly replaced by the consumer activity tax that they call the CAT tax. The CAT tax never took off as quickly as they thought it would. And then state foundation support next year will be down the equivalent of a little over 2%. Okay, so that puts our total loss compared to where we currently stand fiscal year 11 at the end of fiscal year 13 at $709,000. That, I believe, is somewhere around 11.5% decrease from where we're currently at. So for next year, we're looking at a little over 9%. The following year, 11.5%, and that's all relative to where we currently stand this fiscal year. Okay, these are the preliminary numbers. What we don't know is how this is going to hold out. There's no guarantee that what's here will hold. They have until June 30th to pass the state budget, to officially pass it through the House and the Senate and have the governor approve it. And so these could change. We talked to Todd McKinney, our local House rep here. His feelings are, he's He's new to it, he openly admits that. He doesn't see that there's a lot of wiggle room, but he said he can't say that for sure. He just doesn't know. We've talked to other representatives like Tom Ash down at FASA in Columbus, and it's the same word. So we're still having to plan for what could be our worst case scenario, even though these numbers are showing this right now, because we're up against timelines. We have basically this month right now to notify teachers if they're not going to be returning for next school year, if their contracts are going to be suspended. And so unfortunately, we're going to have to go through tonight recommending a number of teachers and tutors having contracts suspended, when in all reality, if these numbers hold, as you'll see here, this board will hopefully be able to be recommended to recall a number of them before next school year even starts. We just have to plan accordingly right now based on the best information that we have, so that we don't get in a position where we haven't cut enough, these numbers change, and then we have no recourse because we've missed contractual deadlines. With this, there's two areas that they talk about when they talk about how these numbers could change. A lot of affluent areas are being hit a lot harder than this with their percentage that they're losing from the state, and there's some fear that they may have a very strong lobbying support to try to convince the legislature to change this a little bit. And then there's also the local governments, which are getting hammered. I think they're losing like 50% of what they're getting funded, and I know in talking to people in Columbus, a lot of legislators, I think, worry about that. And so there could be movement. Plus, I read in the paper that $250 million of his budget is based off of the federal government granting relief on some interest that's owed to the federal government by the state of Ohio. And there's no guarantee that the federal government's going to grant that interest relief. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air right now as far as this goes, and only time will tell. So what have we done? We knew back in the fall, in November, when we reran and submitted to the board for approval a revised 5-year forecast showing two things: that we had failed the levy and that we were going to anticipate a 10% reduction in state funding. We targeted $950,000 as the number that we needed to cut before next school year. So as you see these numbers, keep in mind that this is an 18-month period of time we were working with. We had the whole second half of this current school year and all of next school year to accumulate these expenses that you'll see here. So this isn't all just for next school year. Some of this has been going on actively since January, actually November. So we made changes in busing. As most of you know, we went from, in January, we went from 2 bus runs, 1 K through 5, 1 6 through 12, down to 2 bus runs, or to 1 bus run, K through 12. The good thing was we were able to not have to cut services for any of our students, and it maximized the potential savings that we could have. It actually saved us more money than if we would have cut the state minimum. So that was a good thing, if there's a good thing about having to do something like this. Okay, these numbers are a little different than the ones that I've showed before because some other things have factored out since then. We knew at the time when we recommended it, we had recommended the option without adding an extra bus. We knew that Tim Fox, who's no longer with the district, who left on his own accord, and we miss him not being here. He felt that we could possibly do this without having to add the extra bus, so we tried. Okay, but all along we had said safety first, and we quickly found out that we actually needed to have an additional bus, so we added him. And then we have actually 1 additional bus on top of that that's running right now too. So those costs are factored in here, so this is a little less. It was about $200,000 and $100,000, so we've reduced it a little bit to account for that. This pay to participate was recommended to the board, and they enacted it right away in November. And so that was in effect for the winter sports season and the fall and the spring sports season. You can see here that these are projected numbers that we would bring in based upon the enrollment within each of those sports the previous year. This elimination of the storage unit, got rid of that in Alliance. elimination of some wireless cards that were in the district, some reduction in cell phones that were here in the district. There was a retirement in the treasurer's office that took effect February 1st, and in filling that full-time with a half-time, part-time replacement, the district was able to recognize over that 18-month period of time $51,000 in savings. A bulk of that is benefits. That's not all salary. And we're going to talk a little bit, I'll talk a little bit about this, and this will be on the agenda for later on after executive session tonight. But we've just recently finished with negotiations with all three of our unions. The teacher union, WEA, our non-certified union, OPSI, and our secretary union. And we're very fortunate that we've been able to have them come together to help us figure this problem out. And collectively, with what we've been able to achieve through negotiations, we will save for next school year $294,650 through concessions. That includes salary base freezes, salary step freezes, and a big chunk of that is a savings that we're recognizing because we were able to get all the unions over to one health insurance plan that's increasing deductibles and increasing the amount that they have to pay for prescriptions. That alone is saving, has the ability and projected through Medical Mutual, who we work with, to save $230,000 a year. Now I will say, just to put this out there openly, in order to make that change, we did agree to give a one-time $500 stipend to each employee to do that. But even when we take away that one-time stipend, we're still saving close to $170,000 with this insurance change for next year. And every year thereafter, we're going to recognize $230,000 in savings. So it seemed like a very small price to pay for great savings for our district. And again, we're very thankful for our unions for stepping up and working collaboratively with us. And it's very tough. The teacher union took a freeze last year. They increased their premium that they paid on health care last year. And so they've continued to step up and help us out. The other unions were up again this year. So we're very, very fortunate with that. We are not going to be using air conditioning in our buildings. We're told by Chevron, who manages our House Bill 264 energy efficiency program, that should save us approximately $18,000 a year. Transportation, Building and Grounds, we had that unexpected resignation of Tim Fox. We have not filled that position as of yet. We're taking time to study it to see if we can get by with something less than full-time. So this number here represents the savings for the second half of this year through the rest of his contract. Plus, we're projecting that we probably will at some point hire a part-time person. So that shows the savings for next year and the rest of this year with that. Preschool unit, we're partnering with the county. The county's going to be opening a preschool unit here at Waterloo, 1, maybe 2, depending on whether they can find enough to do the second one, but we're guaranteed 1. That unit will be run by the county education service center. They'll take care of the teachers, all of that stuff. What we get is a $6,000 price break from them that'll save our district $6,000. And we also get, and that's not factored into any of this, but currently when students in preschool are identified with learning disabilities, the district from 3 and older has the responsibility to transport those students to wherever it is that they send them to school, and the responsibility to educate them. And so we've been guaranteed by the county that they will bring all of our Waterloo students back to Waterloo. We won't have to transport them to Brucetown, to Field, or to Southeast for preschool. So there'll be another savings that we should accrue there. Then the other thing that we've been able to do, because of part of what just passed in House Bill 30, new legislation, used to be that so much, a certain percentage of money had to be set aside for supplies. And so we would take that money, set it aside, and that would become part of the building budgets. With it in House Bill 30, they've taken away that provision of the set aside. And so we were able to go back to our principals and ask how much they could give back this year from their building budgets, and collectively that amount came to $42,000 for this school year. And so we're taking that same identical amount out of their building budgets next year, and we'll be able to help our bottom line with that. So when we factor all of this in, all of these different things that we've been doing, that deficit that was once $950,000 is now down to $81,000. Okay, without having to touch reducing any personnel. You know, when we did the busing, we did have to adjust hours of the bus drivers, but we have not had to adjust any personnel positions, and we're down to $81,000. We've been able to protect that core, which has been our goal all along. What's happening in the classroom programming for these kids. We have some other things in the works that should only help us too. The first, obviously, is whatever ends up happening with the state budget. Whenever we know for sure where that's going to be, provided it's not worse than what I already showed you. Medicaid reimbursement, those of you that attend these meetings monthly have heard this before. We have partnered with Ohio Alliance Billing to do Medicaid reimbursement. We have certain students that have learning disabilities that have certain services that can be reimbursable through Medicaid. And so, based off of the preliminary numbers, we were told that with our population size, that we could possibly expect, after they take their 15% for all the work that they do to get these reimbursements, about $51,000 a year for our district. Since that time, we've actually been able to find out exactly which students are identified, and we're working hard to put a hard number to that, not some estimate. So once we know what that hard number is, that will go into our bottom line savings. Right now, it's an estimated figure. Attrition, retirements, unexpected resignations, like I mentioned before with the transportation, all of that stuff affects our bottom line. So we don't know what to expect in some of those areas, whether anything else will happen than we already know. And then lastly, the reduction in positions. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this tonight, because right now, I wish we had more time, to be honest. I wish we didn't have to do what has to be recommended this evening, because I would love to see this picture become clearer before we have to do this, but we don't. Like I mentioned earlier, we have these deadlines that we have to meet. And I want to show you how we go about doing this, so that you just don't think that this is some random thing that's done. Next year, we're projecting, and I'm going to be clear here, there's a difference here. We have to, as we go through and take a look at state minimums to decide what kind of staffing we need based off of state minimums, we have to separate students into regular education and special education, because there's different ratios for each. So this is strictly regular education numbers. So we're projecting next year 988 regular education students, K through 12. Okay, our projection for kindergarten may be a little bit high. Right now, I think it's 56, 59 we're up to. And that's a little lower than where we typically are. So that may end up being high, but we'll see where that ends up here in August. Special education, between all three buildings, another 135 students. State minimum standards. So this is what the law says. With special ed, the intervention specialists, they have two different ratios we have to pay attention to, actually three different things. The first is the maximum caseload ratio, how many students they're responsible for. K through 8 is 16 to 1. K through, our 9 through 12 is 24 to 1. The maximum students that they're allowed to have per period, so per teaching period, K to 8 is 12 to 1, and 9 to 12 is 16 to 1. On top of that, they can't have an age range of more than 60 months in any one instructional period. So those are the parameters we work around in the special ed law. As far as regular education goes, there's two, and they're both 25 to 1. One of them is K through 4, has to be a 25 to 1 ratio. The other is district-wide, 25 to 1. There's one other piece here to the state minimums. We have to have 5 full-time equivalents. This is one last piece, but there's 2 sections within this. They're 2 separate pieces. Of these 8 positions, we have to have 5 full-time equivalents and 5 of the 8 areas covered. Okay, and they define elementary as K through 8. That's important for art, music, and PE. We'll talk about that here in a moment. So when we take a look at our current teacher breakdown, where we stand, you can see the number of teachers in each building. The top here is special education. We do have tutors for special education. We cannot count those tutors into the ratios. Regular education, and then here, this would be the core subject areas. And then here is regular education, and this is what would be considered special classes, the electives at the high school, for example, phys ed, art, music, those type of things. We also have Title I tutors. So when we take a look at where we currently are and try to project, or we take a look at next year, projecting our current ratio, our current number of teachers and the students we're projecting, you can see here K through 4 that according to the 25 to 1 ratio, we could reduce 2 core teachers, core subject teachers. K to 12, it's showing 14, but I want to make mention about this. This is where I think, my own opinion is, this becomes very deceiving. Because within this 54 are 9 special teachers at the high school level, not core subject teachers. We can't include here the elementary art, music, or PE because they're part of that 5 of 8, which is a different category. But this is where the state tells you you have to include the ones at the high school level. So while we could reduce 14 and be to a 24.7 to 1 ratio in theory, I caution that there's a big difference between pupil to teacher ratio when you look at things like this and how you calculate those, and what it actually means for a teacher in a classroom in a given period for class size. You may have a 25 to 1 ratio and have 35 or 40 kids in your class on a given period of time, just because that's the way that that actually works. There's a big difference between pupil-teacher ratio and class size. Other factors that we have to consider as we look at making these changes or are recommending what we're going to recommend: proper licensure and certification, and highly qualified status, HQT. So tonight on the agenda, there's a number of names that are listed, but what we've done is we've gone through and created a list, and there's a lot of detail in this that I want to make sure that I get into and cover here. With this, we've kind of put things in order here. And outside of the technology coordinator position, which is kind of its own entity that's down here on the bottom, this is kind of our list in the order of what we would reduce. First, reduce to top, working our way down to this high school social studies would be the last thing that we would do. Okay, our 10% line with what we had budgeted falls right between consumer science and industrial arts. So if we're cut at that 9–10% level that right now it looks like we will be from the state, there's a chance, because some of these positions up here involve attrition with people retiring or leaving this post but going back into the classroom that are already accounted for. If we can hold at that 10% level, there's a chance that we, at the end of this, when this is all said and done, teaching staff-wise, we may only lose 2 teachers. Even though there's 12 of them on the agenda tonight that are considered teachers that fall on this list, if everything works out for us, we could be losing only 2. But we're not going to know that here until we don't know when. Supplementals, we have a number of other supplementals that we looked at to help us bridge that gap. the supplementals are a little less important as far as where these percentage lines lie, but we're somewhere around this chess club area up, be about the 10%, and then the others working their way down. Some tutor reductions. Now this is different because everything I've talked about so far focuses on state money. These tutor positions are strictly federal funded. And these positions, resource room tutor positions, in the past, every year here at Waterloo have been non-renewed every year in March. The only difference this year is instead of non-renewing in March, we're reducing them through a suspension in contract in April. These Title I positions in the past, not the recent past, within the last 5 years, but in the past, those positions have also been non-renewed. So the tutor stuff, while it's showing up on our list, and that's comprising 13 additional teachers, in some ways this isn't different than what we go through every year. In other ways it is. But along the same lines as what we talk about with the state funding, we don't know where the federal funds are going to end up, and we usually don't until somewhere around the beginning of July. And so right now, I believe what I've read in Education Week is that President Obama has suggested actually increasing both the Title VI-B, which is where the resource room tutor money comes from, and the Title I money. But I've also read that there's some strong opposition in the House and the Senate that would like to see those line items get significantly slashed. So where all of that will end up is a whole nother story that's a lot further away from us than the one that's going on in Columbus. But that's the reason that we're going to be acting on these tonight right now, because again, we can't afford to be in a position where we think we have the money and find out in July, no we don't. And then we have no recourse to be able to lay anybody off or to reduce or suspend a contract, and we have no money to pay them. So we're being proactive here. But our intention would be, if things come back the way that we hope it will, the way that it has yearly with this, that we'll be able to recall most, if not all, of those tutor positions. Okay, so what looks kind of gloomy tonight really could be a much better case scenario as we move forward in the future, depending on how these budgets shake out at the state and federal level. We also had on the list some extended time reductions. We have some individuals that get extra days added to their contract because of the work that they need to do. And if we need to, that's another area where we will cut to make some changes and save some money. So to wrap all of this up here tonight with this, you know, the last piece of this is this May 3rd emergency levy. And so the board has put on the ballot a 4.76 mil emergency levy that will last for 5 years. That's how long the period of the levy request is for, okay? Not how long it will last in the school district. Where did this come from? So most of you, or if not all of you know, in November, there was an 8 mil request on that was continuing. It would have went on forever. That was shot down by a 2-to-1 overwhelming response. We had our public forums on financial options. We talked about the different type of levy options the board could consider, from the continuing to the emergency, to incrementals, to income taxes. And those that were in attendance did not give a lot of feedback on the type to put on, but the feedback that came back loud and clear was, make it as small as you can for as short a period of time as you can. And that's what we brought to the board. Todd sat down, crunched the numbers, and we figured out if we reduce that $950,000 for next year, and that gets us through the 11-12 school year, what can we do to get through an additional year? And that's this 4.76 mil levy. That 4.76 mils, if it passes in May, will get us through the 12-13 school year, fiscal year 13, provided that nothing changes more drastically with the state than what we've already budgeted for. So it gets us out one additional year. And the cost for the homeowner of a $100,000 property valuation is approximately $12.15 a month, $12.15 a month. So we've done what we think the community has asked us to do. You know, what remains to be seen here is what's going to happen on May 3rd. You know, but we're asking the community here to, if they can, in some way to step up and help us out to get through an additional year. And we go from there. I think this is unusual for what you would usually see a district do, because most of the time you don't put something on that's only going to last an additional year. In this particular case, we've heard so much about how our area has been hit hard by the economy, and make it as small and short as possible, that we felt that was the best thing that we could do to come back to the community with. And that we would hope that if we can get this passed, that over the next 2 years, that this economy starts to turn. You know, we can be optimistic, maybe something different happens at the state level with school funding. That's, I'm sure, very, very optimistic, but you never know. And so who knows what can happen over a period of time. But you know, this is where we're at as far as where we currently stand. This is the story behind a lot of the other things that you'll see here tonight. And I want to back up a minute because I think I skipped over one thing I wanted to mention. I didn't mention this online school. The other thing that we are considering doing, and it's actually on the agenda tonight, but I'm going to suggest to the board that we table it for the time being until next month. I'll bring back something. We are actively pursuing creating an online academy for Waterloo, where students can take their classes in an online learning environment, and at the end of the time that they've done that, receive a Waterloo diploma. Why are we doing that? We're well aware that we have like 200 students that are out and about in other places and not at Waterloo that could be here. And a number of those students are out attending community schools that are in an online setting or in homeschool settings. And we think that we have a great ability, because of the Waterloo diploma being offered, because of the potential where they can be part of extracurricular activities here, we think we have the ability to potentially draw a number of those students back, which would help out our bottom line. The way that that works is that money gets deducted from the money we get from the state. We never really see it. It's shown as it's coming to us, and then it goes in funnels to all of these other places. And it's about $5,723 per student. So any money that we can bring back here will impact our bottom line in a positive way. I was set tonight to recommend to you to partner with a company called BLN out of Pennsylvania. And there's some contractual language that we're still working out that I want to make sure that we get ironed out if we go with BLN. But I also became aware of yesterday another company called VLA that offers something very similar, and the costs are different. In some cases, significantly different. So I want to explore that. We want to take the time to make sure that we get this right. But at the end of the day, as we sit down and evaluate these two companies, we want to make sure that what we bring to you is something that we're sure of is going to offer a quality product to these students. If they're going to get a Waterloo diploma, we want it to mean something. We don't want it to be some watered down version of something. So when we get to that item tonight, I would suggest that we table it, and next month we will bring something back again that we're fully confident in for this. But that's another item that may be able to help us with our bottom line. We think that there's great potential that's there for that. So we'll see. We'll see if we're right on that once we actually get this up and running. But our intent would be to recommend something to get going for next fall. So that's where we're at. Any questions on the presentation here?
You made a comment about the resource room tutors.
Yes.
And I know we always get that in sometime in July. Whenever you're saying that President Obama and other people are going back and forth on that, they have to make a decision so that we will know in July, or is that something that they could be discussing for a couple of years and we'll just get what the state gives us?
Quite honestly, what I read over the weekend said that debate could go into November. Todd said that we usually, from the state of Ohio, in our CCIP money, find out around the beginning of July, somewhere in that vicinity, how much money they're allocating to us. So we expect to be able to make some decisions there in July.
So it may just be whatever the state says at this point, and if the federal hasn't made up. Or no, that comes from the federal. So they'll give us some sort of answer. It may not be the final answer, but they'll give us some sort of answer in July.
That's my understanding. Is that correct, Todd? Okay. Any other questions?
I think the one thing that's going to be critical, because you brought up the $425,000 in stimulus money. There's still a bad misconception out there that that was free money that came in from the government that was given to us. And I think we have to be very clear and make sure people understand that the state came to us and said, listen, we're taking away $450,000, but we're going to give you this $425,000 to almost replace what we're taking away. We've heard it on the radio stations, we've seen it in the newspapers. It's a huge misconception that we had all this money and basically wasted it and still going out, and that money was not extra money for us.
Yes. We have actually a nice slide, and I don't have it in this presentation, but a lot of you have seen it in the others, where it shows a bar graph showing our state funding over the year. I think it goes back to fiscal year 9, and you can see that every year it's decreasing. And then Todd has taken and showed the percentage in a different color of that decreasing bar graph, how much of that is actually stimulus money that was there. So you're very right. I mean, there's the perception we got more, when in all reality we actually got less over that time that we had that. So some of you ran this down. This will be online on my website tomorrow for those looking.
I got a question. There's a reporter here, and you just said earlier in your presentation, this way I would, you're giving $500 to each employee of Waterloo, and taking a cut in their health care. I would say, to me, that's improper time to even think about doing that. You're going to give the money that you don't have, but you're asking us, the taxpayers, to pass a $4.7 budget. I mean, it would put in the paper that we're giving $500 to every employee at Waterloo. To me, it's bad time. I don't know, maybe it is, maybe I'm reading.
Well, that's understandable too. I think the thing that gets weighed at in there, at least in my mind with that, and again, these are decisions that the board will have a chance to act on later on. But when we're looking at something like that, the potential to save $230,000 a year, to get a little bit to make that happen, I think that was, in my opinion, a fair thing to do. And I should also state this, the people that were negotiating that contract, Todd and myself on behalf of the board are not included in that group that are receiving the money.
Is
So
that-
that's clear.
Is that principle too? When you would not receive or would?
We suggest that they do. They're on the same list with
I'm
everybody.
just saying, when you, like, listen to all this stuff gets in paper that you're getting a $500 bonus for every employee at Waterloo. My first thing, if I didn't read the details and attend this meeting, I said, what are you asking us for taxpayers?
Well, I guess I would just say.
I know,
this.
I know how you're.
I understand that, and I would hope with the fact that that's fully disclosed, that would be presented as such in any meeting of people that are doing it. People can run and do what they want to do, but the facts are, it was given because we're saving a very significant amount of money, and so we paid a little to save a lot.
Okay, going back another thing, did you meet the criteria of the governor to pay that, was it 15% that they wanted, union employees to pay at their own health care?
Yeah,
Did you meet that standard?
That is something that's not in effect for 90 days.
Right now.
Yeah, right now. And I think any other details on those contracts is something that probably need to wait until the board has time to fully ask some questions in executive session tonight before they vote.
And that's one thing, if I can interrupt. And I did ask Andy, the concessions on the healthcare plan are significant. They really are. And I think, because it's all public information that people can get, and I think we need to show people that the $500 is a small change compared to the concessions that are taken. I mean, just it's tremendous. I guess could have went in and looked and made the concession smaller. You know, but this was something to where that 200, I forget what the dollar was, you know, we don't get that the first year, we still get a vast majority of it, but that's coming every year after. You know, because the, you know, this is it's a one-time.
Does that affect the rate of retirees on their health care, for people who retire?
No, they're through a different
They're
system.
through a different.
They should be, people who retired should be through the SPRS or SDRS, depending on what retirement system you're in. This is strictly for employees.
On the levy, how much is that going to produce?
How was that number, 7?
I know it was
760. It's $759,889.
It'll be slightly different by, here, where's the official?
756,609. Officially what was per year.
So the, this, something, since you got more information. You went down that third year where you had the layoffs. One time, I think it was mentioned 40-some employees or 50-some employees.
And that was including supplemental positions.
That's not, you went down there, you went down halfway. That's not even saying that that thing would even pass. If it wouldn't, you could still only cut half of that.
Yes.
But if it would, here's my, if that would pass, you could save all those people?
No, because one of the things that this whole premise of our 4.76 is based on is that the 950,000 that we cut carries forward every year. So we have to reduce what we anticipated to be 10% for us is roughly 600,000, a little bit over. The reason that 950 is the number because we already had a $430-some thousand projected deficit for next year before we did the 10% reduction. And so that has to be carried forward each year thereafter.
Over the weekend, I heard one school district up around Cleveland, the board went to all the personnel at the school, up for deeply. And they wanted them to take at least a 5% decrease in their salary, right off the top. So if you made 70,000, you'd taking that 5% cut. And that's one way they approach it. I noticed through the last couple of days, fields went after what we talked about, those unions.
You know, I think when you get into this stuff, everybody has to be their own judge, and hopefully people take the time to read and learn about the facts so they can make their own decisions. When you think about the fact that next year we're saving almost $300,000 in concessions because our unions agreed to help us out, I think that's very remarkable. And if people get lost and focus on the $500, that's a darn shame. Because, you know, they received a little to get a lot.
But they're going to, because they're going to look at it like what happened with the bailouts with the government, and then all those executive guys got their bonuses, and all they're going to see is that bonus. It's going to affect the way you explain it to me and how that is saying it won't affect me. But the people that I deal with, they're going to see it.
And I think that's why it's important that the conversation happens tonight, so that people talk about it, and you know what the real facts are. And how
You're going to have to really have it highlighted how much savings.
Yes.
Because at that point we'll go across. It's going to go.
Okay. We'll move on, unless there are any other questions. Just wanted to give you a brief update on this 5-year plan formation process. So we've had a number of meetings. We're working on creating the plan, and I think it's those 9 areas. And we have a number of different things that have come out of all of this stuff. We have an OIP, Ohio Improvement Plan, that we've been working on as a school, where some of those academic goals will be part of the plan. We have a tech committee that's up and running, teachers, administrators, that we're creating a tech plan that will mesh right into this overall plan for our district. We've heard loud and clear at these forum meetings that we've had, and we're figuring out a way to incorporate this into there, a way for us to increase and utilize more volunteers. In order to do that, we have to figure out ways to do that responsibly. We can't just have people running all over the place, but I'm sure there's ways that we could do a better job of incorporating volunteers here. Partnerships with area universities and exploring grants. Those are topics that have come up time and time again, so those will be finding their way into this plan of ours that we will be presenting in June. That being said, the last forum meeting that we had on the school community relations, faculty and staff and pupil personnel last month, I picked a couple different themes that I thought that came out through that meeting. A lot of talk about parenting, volunteering, helping out. How can parents assist us if they can't help with supporting the levy, and they get in here and assist us in other ways. And then on the communication end of things, a lot of talk about writing letters to the editor, and the district moving to use mediums like Facebook and Twitter. So we're exploring all of that right now, with Facebook and Twitter, and we'll go from there, see how it goes. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the resolution items tonight is this potential August 2011 levy request. And it seems crazy to have to even discuss something like this before we know how May even turns out. But because of the way they moved time frames around with House Bill 48 a few years ago, the time that we would have to declare and have into the Board of Elections to be on the ballot in August takes place prior to the actual May election. So we don't really have any choice if we want to consider to be on in August and not miss an opportunity. We have to make some action on that before we even know how May turns out. So I wanted to put that out there. I did look into this. There are a lot of questions everybody always asks, and they're good. What does it cost? Is there more cost associated with doing a special election like that versus a regular election or a primary? Talked to the Board of Elections. They stated that it's really not a difference between primary and general election and all of that. I guess it is because they break stuff up over the cost of how many issues there are. But an even number of years, they only charge back to the places on the ballot for the ballots and advertising. In odd number of years, like we're in now, they charge for everything, every expense they can, they're able to bill back. So they estimated that for our district, and they made it very clear that these are just strictly estimates, that to be on the August ballot would probably cost us between $5,000 and $6,000. And in November, if we were on the November ballot, they estimated half of that. So between $2,500 and $3,000 to be on in November. So there's a cost associated whenever we're on. It just depends on how many others are on there with you, and whether it's an odd or an even year. So, I guess with that being said, I just wanted to see if we wanted to have any discussion on that tonight, if we wanted to wait on any kind of discussion until we see how things work out here with some of these items that were just shown on the board. Any thoughts?
What are the dates again that we would have to have our first hearing?
We would have to have everything has to be into the Board of Elections 90 days prior, which is May 4th. But in order to pass those resolutions, they say that you have to have everything into the county auditor by the 29th of April, which is 95 days before the election. because the county auditor has 5 days to turn around and certify the amounts to get to the Board of Elections. So the latest that we would be able to act is April 29th, which is a Friday, and we would have to pass 2 resolutions prior to that time.
As a board member, I don't think we should consider putting a bid on the numbers. Just wait, see what happens in May, and then discuss our possibilities and whatever.
And it's no different, because our tax money won't start until the taxable year of January of next year, right? So we wouldn't even get the money in until,
We'll actually start at the 12th school,
so,
or
right,
balance 2012.
2020.
The only advantage, I mean, why would we even talk about this? The only advantage to doing something like this is to not miss an opportunity. Because there's only, after this August or April, May election, there will only be 2 more opportunities before we get into a following year where we don't get the funding, so. But any other thoughts from everyone?
I think in the past, when we've had an August election, we were the ones that said no. It's really hard to get the information out there. Kids aren't in school, parents aren't, it's just really hard to get the information to people and to get volunteers and to raise money and that sort of thing. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the language is right.
Okay, then we get into the resolutions here. This first one is something that we're required to do through, I think this may have been part of House Bill 1, if I'm not mistaken, this financial readiness. So the language that's here is the suggested language from the Ohio Department of Education. We have to submit the resolution along with the plan for how we're going to implement this beginning next school year. So I recommend to approve the following resolution for the teaching of financial literacy in college and career readiness in grades 7 and/or 8.
Okay, now a motion to recommend we approve the following resolution for teaching of financial literacy and college and career readiness in grades 7 and/or 8.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
any questions or comments?
I just want to make one comment. Here we are tonight, later in the meeting, we're going to go through and we're going to reduce, unfortunately, some ridiculous number of staff members due to funding, and the state pushes these additional classes on us, which I consider to be an unfunded mandate. They aren't giving us any extra money. And then what's even more ridiculous is they pass along some verbiage that we're supposed to pass on it that says, whereas the Waterloo Board of Education believes and supports. Waterloo Board of Education had absolutely zero input on this. The state said, you will do this, and we do it. We're doing it. I mean, so that's just another example of the ridiculousness of the state of Ohio and the way that they approach education and the way they approach public school systems in communities like us. They're just here to do, they just seem to be able to do anything they want to us, and we just have to take it. So.
Any other comments?
Was this something that came out of the current administration there? or-
Now, this has been in the works for a few years.
Anything else? Roll call?
Hawk?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Motion passes.
Okay, item number 6 is the one that I'm going to suggest that we table tonight. Or, yeah, just move on, just pull it, yeah, I'll withdraw it. Okay, into the personnel. Number 1, recommend to issue continuing contracts to the following, effective with the 11-12 school year, contingent upon full and complete compliance with the state of Ohio and Waterloo Board of Education eligibility criteria.
Okay, now a motion to issue continuing contracts for the following listed effective with the 2011-12 school year.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Young?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue 1-year limited contracts to the following certified staff, effective with the 11-12 school year. Is that enough? I need to read
Yes.
that.
Recommend to issue one-year limited contracts to the following as listed, effective 2011-12 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? On all of these, they're all, we do this every year. You have, the way it goes through, contract 1, 2, 3, and then continuing, and then the ones that have been here longer, they get a salary note, with salary notice. So, I mean, that's the way the system goes through. And so every year we do this at this time, so you know, so no, we don't have to go through the whole, we make sure everything's in complete compliance, so. Any other comments or questions? Roll call?
Pop? Yes. Pusateri?
Yes.
Gum?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue 2-year limited contracts to the following certified staff.
I have a motion to issue 2-year limited contracts to the following certified staff. Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Pop?
Yes.
Pusateri?
Yes.
Gum?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Yes. Motion passes.
Recommend to issue 3-year limited contracts to the following certified staff.
I have a motion to issue 3-year limited contracts to the following certified staff as listed.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Pop?
Yes.
Pusateri?
Yes.
Gum?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue salary notices to the following certified staff.
I have a motion to issue salary notices to the certified staff listed.
So moved.
Second? I'll second. Any questions or comments?
I just want to comment that I have a family member that is part of this resolution, so therefore I'm required to abstain. So there's nothing, it's not meant to get anyone in that group or anything like that, but it is a requirement.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call?
Pop?
Yes.
Pusateri?
Abstain.
Gum?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue the following tutor contracts effective with the 11-12 school year.
I have a motion to issue the following tutor contracts as listed.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Pop?
Yes.
Pusateri?
Yes.
Gum?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue the following tutor salary notices effective with the 11-12 school year.
I have a motion to issue the following tutor salary notices as for those listed.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments?
You know, I have just one question on these. How does, if Senate Bill 5 goes through, how does it affect all the contracts and the lengths?
If it goes through, anybody that I believe received a teaching license after, is it January 1st of this current year, 11, would not be able to get a continuing contract, you know, for sure.
Well, that's after the.
After it passes. But anybody that before that, and then it changes the length of contracts that can be offered from, I'm not, I don't know off the top of my head, I want to
No,
say.
I didn't mean to put you on that. I
No
was
more
just
than
thinking.
3 years of time
Okay.
or something.
But it does affect us.
It does affect it. There's a different set of criteria, especially continuing contracts basically become non-existent if you received your license after the effective date of the bill. If you have it right now, you're still under the same rules that are in effect,
Okay.
the way I understand it, but after that, there's no more continuing contracts.
Okay, thank you.
But, that wouldn't happen until the November election, correct?
But it provided they have enough votes for the.
If they have enough signatures. So as far as these go, it shouldn't affect us.
Right.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Roll call?
Pop?
Yes.
Pusateri?
Yes.
Gum?
Yes.
Percheck?
Yes.
Whittlesley?
Motion passes.
Recommend to approve the suspension of contracts for the following certified staff. And I want to clarify something I'm going to ask you. Mr. Carpenter can note this in the minutes. I wanted this to distinguish between teachers and tutors. That will help us for our record keeping because they're two distinct categories contractually. So just for what it's worth here tonight, the teachers are the first four lines left to right. Ending, the last row is Radish, Conley, Dockery. And then the people beginning with Riley, Strout, and Klingon-Smith to the bottom are the tutors. And again, I just want to remind everybody that the teachers are affected here by what happens with the state budget. The tutors are affected by what's going to happen with the federal budget. And again, we typically non-renew our resource tutors every year. So while the number is large, this is not in some ways different than what's been done in the past.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the suspension of contracts for the following certified staff effective for the 2011-12 school year due to reduction in force.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
any questions or comments? Roll call.
Pop,
Yes.
Busateri? Yep. Gump,
Yes.
Purchek,
Yes.
Whittlesley.
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue a substitute secretary contract to Brenda Dowse for the 10-11 school year.
May I have a motion to issue a substitute secretary contract for Brenda Dowse for the 2010-11 school year?
So moved.
Okay. Roll call, or any questions or comments? Roll call.
Pop,
Yes.
Busateri? Yes. Gump,
Yes.
Purchek, Whittlesley.
Motion passes.
Recommend to approve 3 days of unpaid leave for Deborah Morgan.
May I have a motion to approve 3 days of unpaid leave for Deborah Morgan?
So moved. I'll second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call.
Pop,
Yes.
Busateri? Yes. Gump,
Yes.
Purchek,
Yes.
Whittlesley.
Motion passes.
Recommend to accept the retirement resignation of the following certified staff.
May I have a motion to accept the retirement resignation for the following staff listed?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? All I can say is it's going to be really strange to be in a building without Lynn Jones in the building, or out of the building, or anywhere around the building. She's really been dedicated for a long time, so I'm sure she will be missed.
And we want to thank both of them for their service here over the years.
Brenda,
Great job.
as I said earlier, she's doing the art show down there. She started that. I think we didn't have that before. So, yeah, both of them. Any other questions or comments? Roll call.
Pop,
Yes.
Busateri? Yes. Gump,
Yes.
Purchek,
Yes.
Whittlesley.
Motion passes. I wish them luck.
Recommend to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Waterloo Board of Education and Waterloo Education Association effective for the 10-11 school year.
And then a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Waterloo Board of Education and WEA effective for 2010-2011 school year.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
any questions or comments?
Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, that's in regards to the teachers and tutors. That makes it clear that there's a distinction between teachers and tutors.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call.
Pop,
Yes.
Busateri? Yes. Gump,
Yes.
Purchek,
Yes.
Whittlesley.
Motion passes.
Recommend to issue a substitute teacher contract to Melinda Bratton effective Monday, April 11, 2011.
Can I have a motion to issue a substitute teacher contract to Melinda Bratton effective April 11?
So moved.
Second. Any questions or comments? Roll call.
Pop,
Yes.
Busateri? Yes. Gump,
Yes.
Purchek,
Yes.
Whittlesley.
Motion passes.
I do have an addendum item for personnel, number 14 here. We recommend to issue a substitute bus driver contract for the 10-11 school year to William Holly.
Can a motion to issue a substitute bus driver contract to William Hawley for the 2010-11 school year.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
any questions or comments?
How are we fixed for substitute bus driver?
We're still, we still are pretty non-existent in that aspect. We're getting by, we have some people that are stepping up and helping us, but we truly have one substitute driver. So when we're multiple drivers down, we're pulling from different areas to get it done.
Mr. Hall retired?
He did.
Previously, okay.
He did, and then, he's now able to come back and help if he's willing to do that as needed.
So do you and Todd have to go get your CDLs?
That's my question out there. Anytime I meet someone, do you have your CDL?
We're working, I actually had another gentleman that came in today that's interested, and one of our tutors actually approached me today and wants to, so we're working on getting them through the process. It's a pretty long, lengthy process that it may not be before the year ends that they can actually help us, but will help us in future years.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk?
Yes.
Busatera?
Yes.
Johnson?
Yes.
Percheck? Yes. Whittlefield?
Motion passes.
Under operations, recommend to amend resolution 1106 to establish the meeting time of 7 p.m. beginning May 12, 2011. That came out of a discussion last time that Diane had initiated.
I have a motion to establish the meeting time at 7 o'clock for our board meetings at beginning May 12, 2012. Second?
I'll second.
Any questions, comments? If I'm late, call me, because, especially Andy, he's been coming at 7:30 for a long time, probably, so we're all probably gonna be late next month. So if we're late, give us a couple months to get used to it. So, give us a couple months to get used to it. All right, any other questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk? Yes. Busatera? Yes. Johnson?
Yes.
Percheck? Abstain. Whittlefield?
Motion passes.
Okay, commendations, just a quick mention of some of these. We have a lot, but Sean Umstead was at the state level geography lead at Ohio State. We have 8 teachers that are being recognized by State Support Team 8, Region 8, that Miss Early, and 7 of them are from the elementary school, and then Miss Savada from the high school. So congratulations to Carrie Savada, Pam Murph, Tiffany Eichler, Judy Benson, Tom McKinnon, Debbie Thompson, Jim Busateri, and Tina Spellman. We have 2 Teens of the Month for March, Kyle Smith and Melissa Berger. And then a number of student athletes were recognized for their accomplishments within the PTC conference and some in the Northeast Ohio. And we had one boys basketball player get all special mention at the state level, Brendan Milburn. So congratulations to those student athletes.
I noticed in the paper either today or yesterday, it listed the scholar athlete. So that was nice. We had a very nice representative group of students, and I'm sure they'll be in here next month. They were just released, but it was very nice to see.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Under new business, Andy, does anything under new business?
Maintenance, will be putting on a renewal, their renewal of November now. That's something that they have to do, because that's basically all their funding. And of course, that's really only about take over failing schools. Now, in some states, failing schools is designated by rule. In Michigan, they recently did it by both testing scores and whether or not they're financially failing. So in Ohio, was apparently would be schools that are not performing. The bottom 5% of the districts in the last 3 years have been taken over by the teachers and the parents. But there's no no details of how that would happen. It's another ridiculous thing case that she's proposing. One of the things that I'm surprised that there hasn't been more talk about this is the contribution levels for the two school-related state retirement systems will be changed to 12% for both the employees and the employers, which is currently 14 and 10, which means all the teachers and staff will be taking a 2% pay cut. Have we factored that into our?
We have not factored that in yet.
I never factor anything based on what ifs or.
Well, that's.
We believe that that number is somewhere around $100,000, but I'm mistaken.
$120,000, but Senate Bill 5 could override that as well as there's pending legislation for retirement systems as well that have proposed changes to the contribution rate. So we're not quite sure how that all.
Well, this is what as much money as most of the others.
The other numbers. We did not plug any of that in.
Okay, and then reduction in force for teachers will focus on evaluation rather than seniority. If the budget passes. Under school choice, they would double the number of education choice vouchers available in 12 and quadruple the number in fiscal year 13. Eliminate the cap on charter schools. Details about the expansion of choice are not yet available. It's likely that the increase in the number of students taking vouchers or attending charter schools will be funded through reductions from school district state funding. So basically, what Mr. Kasich wants to do, and also was said about the local governments are being cut, he wants to privatize everything in the state of Ohio. You have to understand Mr. Kasich is tied to the boys in the sunglasses. He spent 18 years in Congress as on the budget committee, and he worked for Lehman Brothers before they went bankrupt and lost $480 million in the state teachers retirement fund. So basically, he wants to privatize everything in the state of Ohio, school systems, local governments, absolutely everything. So that's all I have.
One thing that's interesting, I don't know if you saw, it was a huge article in the Beacon Journal last week, the charter schools, where you have the boards of these charter schools that are suing White Hat because they're not getting the money to be able to meet the state requirements for teaching, for education, that's for, which is absolutely amazing. So, I mean, it's a huge for-profit industry, and they're squeezing everything out to get the most profit. So, did you see that?
I did, yeah, and they, when I've asked before to some of the senators and representatives how it can be that a system gets created where there's no accountability or very little, the response is David Brennan, who runs White Hat, funded half of the people down in Columbus to get elected. And, I don't know if that's sarcastic or if that's true. That's
true.
Yeah,
That's very true.
All they want to do is steal the money, no accountability for the money or the education.
Yeah, and they did mention the records of the charter schools are far worse than the public schools. I mean, the education, the testing is way, very.
I believe the gentleman you mentioned, for our previous Republican president, he hosted dinners that were many $1,000s a plate and raised $2, $3, $4 million in one night for the governor of Ohio, who was a Republican, and the president who was running for re-election and re-election. And he seemed to get a charter school. Is that how that works?
Does anybody else have anything under other business?
So I think one thing that's interesting is I think if we sum up, and I apologize, I'm not planning on saying any of this tonight, but if we sum up what has happened with our teaching staff, ridiculed and so on, like you mentioned, Dave, here and there. Last year, they took a freeze on the rates and increased the amount of money they pay for their health insurance. And I guess I really can't say that. There's other things that are going to happen tonight, pending the new contract that are going to equal 200 and quite a substantial savings, which is coming right out of their pockets. And we've got Senate Bill 5 legislation that is going to take another 2% out of their pockets, and it's probably going to increase the amount of money they're paying for health insurance. Again, above and beyond the last two times that they negotiated contracts. All that on a job that starts on with a 4-year college education, about $31,000 a Wow. To me, that's just terrible, terrible, terrible. I think that the way we're going to turn the teaching profession into, right up there with retail work as far as pay goes. And you don't do things for money. I mean, you shouldn't do everything you do for money, but you have basic needs that you need to survive at some level. I have a nephew that's a sophomore in college in an engineering program, and I went through an engineering program, Denny went through an engineering program, and I don't know if anybody else did, but when you're a sophomore in college, you pretty much know nothing about engineering. You've spent 90% of your time has been about basic courses, the Englishes and what have you. It's making the equivalent of $60,000 a year as a co-op student. He's a sophomore in college. That's co-op. But yet we have 4-year teachers that we're putting in charge, and we're saying, we're handing over our students, our kids, to teachers with 4 years degrees. We're starting them out at $30,000. We're putting in, the thing that nobody mentions is all the social problems in the world today, in the broken families and the this and that, and all the things that we all know about are out there. All that stuff comes in the classroom too. All the special needs that happen with students, that all comes to the classroom. Whether it's, you feel for, whether it's some kind of a ADDH or it's autism or whatever, all that comes. And we just keep pecking away. For some reason, I don't know why we picked the profession of teaching to peck away at and to bring down. But to me, it's just atrocious what's going on, and the fact that what's happening. I mean, family is very, obviously the number one, the most important things with raising any kid is your family. But also the next thing is is education. And I don't know where it's going to go. It's really disturbing for me when you see all the things that happen. It's very disappointing.
We have wonderful teachers here, to the point where my daughter, because of the teachers here, wants to be a teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not stopping her because, that's just, and they have, and we're excellent with distinction, and we've got an amazing school here. So, none of this is easy, and I know you all know that. But
however, we will have financial literacy and college and career readiness for grade 7 and 8.
we will be paying for.
You can sleep easy.
It's not just teachers, everybody.
I know.
There's
We know, but it's-
thousands of other people losing their jobs and everything else out there. I mean, right now, everybody's being affected. Me as a business person, everybody.
We know,
It's
but it's hard
it's
to sit here and do this
everybody.
for those teachers.
It's
that
not
are
good, it's not good. Like you said, all the teachers have at least 4 years, most of them have 4. And it's hard to do what they do. We just got to fight through it, and it's going to be a few more years.
Oh, okay. The May meeting, Jenny, you're gonna be gone, and Diane, you're gonna be gone, right? So do we still want to have the May meeting on that date, or do we want to do it on another date?
I'm not being rude. I'm looking at my calendar.
That's what I figured you were doing.
Well, if we're looking to reschedule to be going, what can be, is there anything else that
On
we
that whole
can?
week.
That week, no, that week I could do Tuesday or Wednesday.
I'm in Washington DC, Tuesday through Friday.
Okay. So if we're looking at it, we would have to do, you can't do Monday that week?
I cannot do Monday.
So we do have to look at the week before or the week after.
I cannot do the 19th and, or the 18th.
Okay. 18th is our Monday. You want to go before? That's a Thursday before, is the fifth. Can we move it soon?
Um,
Fourth is Wednesday, the fifth is Thursday.
My table is 19th, right?
yeah, and that Thursday before, I could do the Wednesday, I could do the Tuesday.
The third or the fourth?
Towards the end of that week.
Okay.
I can't do the 4th. I can do the 3rd.
So does the third work for everybody?
The third is a Tuesday, right?
Brian, both of them.
Third is election
that?
day.
Rick and
You want to have it that day?
Well, we would never
The
get out.
third is
We'd be
election
here.
day.
With Rick here, we'd never get out.
You want to meet on election day?
There's nothing we can be doing
How
there.
about the Monday of the week following the fall?
The
That works for me.
16th.
16th?
I'm in Michigan.
Oh, that's a public,
Right.
I could always move to public forum if I had to.
Is it that, we don't have school that day?
No, that's a waiver day, but we do have the forum.
What about the 17th?
I can do 17th.
17th?
As of right now, I can do the
17th?
13th.
It's a Tuesday. Okay.
Okay, so May 17th.
17th at 7 o'clock.
All right.
Oh, wait a minute.
Wait, you can't.
It's normally when we do something.
Oh, okay. What time is that? Can we make it later for that meeting? Can we make that meeting later that night? Well, if you want to do it, can we do the meeting a little bit later that night? So that we can get it in? Or you're okay? What time, you tell me, what do you want to do? You want to make it like 7:45? You sure? Oh, I don't like to ask you to do that, because that's.
You can do that, that's special, that's nice, that's good, that's.
How long is that meeting usually? You usually do that at the beginning of the meeting?
18th, what's the 8th of September?
I'm not
So we'll
really
go back to 7.
What about?
7:30, I'll be here on Sunday.
I can do the 18th.
I can do the 18th.
So we're doing the 17th at 7:30?
Yep.
17th is 7:30. See, we knew we'd get back to 7:30. No, we all did agree, it's just, we're just teasing Diane. I don't know.
Well, I brought this up several months ago. I don't know if you remember, but June 9th we sent out a date for graduation.
Oh, okay. So Diane won't be here for the night. Is everybody else going to be here for the night? Schedule?
7:30?
This is
On the
18th.
17th.
Day after the last one. Is that okay, Diane? You still?
Dave?
You still have it? Still report? It's our regular.
Oh.
Okay? At 7? Okay, we're good then?
That's gonna be at 7, right?
That's going to be at 7. Well, Diane, we should change
We
it.
should make it 7:30.
All right, okay, so 7 o'clock on June 9th, 7:30 on the 17th. Got it? Okay. It's the day after the day we have off. Yeah, it's not months. Okay. The signature box, just sign your name and phone number or address? Address, so that they can pick it up after the election. You can fill that out and take one with you, or however many, just write down how many you take. And fill out the paper, it's right above it on the counter there. Anything else? Anybody else think of any other business? Okay. Treasurer's report, Todd?
Recommend approving the March minutes.
And a motion to approve the March minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk? Yes. Pusateri? Yes. Gump?
Yes.
Burchett?
Yes.
Whittleson?
Motion passes.
Next item is recommend to approve the February financial statements.
Can I have a motion to approve the February financial statements?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk?
Yes.
Pusateri? Yes. Gump?
Yes.
Burchett?
Yes.
Whittleson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The last item I have is to recommend to accept the following donations as listed to the Waterloo Baseball Fund.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the following donations to the Waterloo Baseball Fund?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you, that's very good.
Wonderful. Any other questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk? Yes. Pusateri? Yes. Gump?
Yes.
Burchett?
Yes.
Whittleson?
Motion passes.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to recess into executive session to discuss preparing for conducting or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions for public employees concerning their compensation and other terms and conditions of their employment?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Roll call?
Hawk? Yes. Pusateri? Yes. Gump?
Yes.
Burchett?
Yes.
Whittleson?
Motion passes. After that, we will reconvene, and we expect to have action when we come out. We don't know how long we'll be, but you're more than welcome to stay if you want to. If not, thank you for coming.
Dave Moulton's providing free coffee and donuts to everybody out there.
Yeah, follow me on.